everyone, and welcome to our session on the forced experimentation and digital transformation through the pandemic. My name is James Dye. I'm the UK Commercial Director of Commerce Tools, and I have an incredible lineup of guests for you today. They're all representing themselves as thought leaders within this commerce space, but also the companies they work for, who are all playing a crucial role in this modern commerce journey. We have Sonia Curl, who is the VP of the Mac Alliance, and also the Global Head of Product Marketing at Contentstack, who are spearheading forward-thinking companies' move to headless content. We have Eric Chaumeny, who is the Managing Director of CPG Industries for EMEA at Google Cloud, who will host 90%. We host 90% of our cloud-native functionality and do the same for many of our customers. We have Roland Prins, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Adyen, who is a leading global payment provider and powers most of the innovative omni-channel payment experiences that are out there. And we have Pascal Lagarde, who is the SVP for Commerce at Valtech, who are our most experienced delivery partner and global leaders in commerce innovation. Welcome to you all, and thank you very much for joining us. For the next 30 minutes, you'll be listening to a conversation between us on how the pandemic has affected the commerce landscape. But please remember, and don't forget you can get involved. There is a chat box to your right-hand side. Please do ask questions. And we'll try to get to those questions at the end. So going back to the topic, McKinsey recently published a paper that stated that COVID triggered a 10-year jump in e-commerce penetration within 90 days. Along with that growth, we're seeing a huge increase in commerce innovation. So the question really is open to everyone to start off with, but I'll target it for you, Pascal, to start. What trends are you seeing and that will shape the post-COVID future?
Yeah, definitely an interesting question. And we have definitely also seen that big jump in e-commerce adoption. I think, the past year has been about this rapid response to whatever the pandemic threw at us. And I think we are now looking at how to kind of harden that and how to really build those seamless experiences that that customers will be expecting moving forward when we get out of this pandemic.
And Eric, have you got any opinions?
Yeah, first of all, this pandemic was very brutal. Nobody was planning it. So for many companies, it was very difficult to react in a very short time, but it created a positive effect as now many retailers or many CPG brands have created a new connection with their consumers, new capacity to better understand the trends. So on one side, it's very difficult for them because it was not expected. On the other side, it obliged those companies to build new trends and new reactions, and we will certainly speak about that later.
Interesting. And Sonia, your thoughts?
I'd agree with the gentleman. I think what was interesting is that it was a forced renewal of technology and looking at agile. Not just from the project, not just from the technology, but crucially from the project perspective. But it wasn't really something that organizations planned to do. To Eric's point, they were thrown into that. It was a matter of survival. But at the same time, they've seen, oh, wow, this works too. We can operate in a different mode. What if we don't just make that a strategy of perseverance, but we adopt that for future? And I see a lot of organizations having had a mind shift happening across the entire organization and dare now to think about more innovation as a core part and faster rollouts of digital experiences and commerce innovation. Yeah.
Interesting. And your opinions, Roland?
Yeah, no, building on that, I think, we play in the space of payments online, in store, at Adyen. And I think, one of the things we've seen is really for the past 10 years, I think a lot of us in retail have been talking about the promise of omni-channel unified commerce for a long, long time. And it's always been this really tough nut to crack, requiring a lot of resource and pretty much a slow thing to really evolve. And that's accelerated big time over the past 16 months. Where unified commerce omni-channel has for the first time really delivered, in my opinion, and that's the outcome of this.
Does anybody think of anything that they've seen, any sort of particular applications that do you think will stick post pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a lot of stores have gone to, order online and, pick up, click and collect, or curbside pickup, or whatever, label you want to put on it. And, I'm really interested to see, how we as consumers, to which extent we will go back to how we've been acting, 2 years ago, and to which extent we will be keeping some of those things that we have gotten used to over the last year and a half, when indeed it comes to ordering online, getting stuff delivered, etc. And obviously, there is a part of the audience that have always been doing that, or at least are more or less the early adapter of those kind of mechanisms. But my mother orders stuff online now; she never did, and I don't really think she'll keep doing that for at least for a part.
It's interesting, isn't it? It was so long. Remember, like a year ago, we thought it's going to be over in a few weeks, but if it's so long, it becomes a consumer habit. I never used to order online like groceries because I love walking through the aisles. Now I have a rhythm, like I order on Sunday afternoon, I order on Wednesday night. I'm not going to change that habit for sure. Yeah.
So you mentioned Sonia as well. Sorry, Eric, come.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, behind the scene, it accelerated all cloud operation because it has to be very simple, very quickly, and you cannot do that if you are not having hosted your applications on cloud. So it accelerated cloud operations. And I've seen everything was around consumer or customer centricity. Everything was about the consumer and only the consumer, like Pascal was saying, or Sonia was saying, so curbside, how to better deliver consumers, how to better know consumers, how to better satisfy consumers. So everything was about this, because when your stores are closed, you have only the only link you have with your consumers is mobile, is e-stores, and then you have to develop your application so that your consumers are going to be very close to you, even though you don't see them no more for weeks or for months. So yeah, consumer centricity and cloud operation, according to me, we are the ones to accelerate during that pandemic period.
It's interesting, Sonia, you mentioned the headspace shift within businesses, or this kind of forced experimentation. Do you think that's going to continue that same pace, or do you think as people go back to business as usual, there will be the usual friction to getting anything done in the business, or do you think that's changed?
I see a lot of companies where that has changed, especially the ones that went into the pandemic with market technology. I think if you look across the board through the annual reports, every CEO mentioned how amazing it was that the technology enabled the business to pivot when they needed to, and how quickly, especially those that had brick and mortar stores and could offset with digital. I do think, James, that we'll see the divide between the leaders and the laggards to grow, certainly over the next, say, 24 months. There is still people that think everything is going to go back to the old world. And I think we still will see another wake-up call for those executives in the next year.
Moving on, so as the stores shut their doors during lockdown, we've seen a faster rise in the number of channels customers can shop in. Twitter recently launched some more shoppable tweets. We've seen ByteDance investing millions into commerce. So this idea of contextual commerce is obviously here to stay. Question to you, Roland. As Adyen is very much at the forefront of this frictionless omni-channel payments, what interesting or unusual channels or new transactional use cases have you been seeing?
Yeah, no, so much has happened, and I'll give you a few examples of things we see. So one example is with this cosmetics company Rituals, who are operating all over the world. They work with us for their online payments in store, and of course, being faced with having to shut down all their stores, they were scrambling like, hey, how can we start to deliver products to people from our stores and really turn their stores into delivery centers? At the same time, they introduced, by force, really, the ways to interact with shoppers through WhatsApp and other messaging tools. And this worked out really well for them. They saw that it becomes a much more personal way to interact with consumers. they were able to, have a better channel to offer special promotions, have more personalized products sold. And the conversion rates were actually very significant, like over 90% or something. And the average value of what they were selling was also higher than their typical normal e-commerce channel. So they suddenly found like, wow, this channel is more personal. People really open for it, and it works really nicely. So that's here to stay, and we've seen many others follow the same model. And for us, that meant like introduce new ways to enable payments. So we, build specific pay by link functionalities that you can then embed into these messaging tools to make these things possible. So no, absolutely, it's been fascinating, and I think the path for the future is here.
Interesting. And as you started to empower these new journeys for your customers, has your relationship changed with the customers?
Yeah, well, there's two things. I think on the one hand side, of course, a lot of our customers came to us to try and see, hey, help us out. We have a new situation here, much more focus around contextual commerce. So how do we enable that? People come to you to see, help us out. So for us, it meant, change instantly what you put your focus on, develop new solutions that fit nicely there. And in such a crisis, if you can help each other, of course, it brings you closer to each other. So that has had an impact. I think the other thing that I mentioned earlier that I find really interesting is that the role of data, which is of course a big promise of omni-channel commerce, for the first time had a real impact here. So for example, we had a large UK department store that had been working with us for their online payments and in-store payments for quite some time. They had to shut down everything physically. And of course, they saw quite a peak with their online traffic. And they had quite some debate internally around, hey, what's going on? Are these, the assumption was we're seeing a lot of our existing customers that used to shop in store now all move online. So generally not a lot of difference other than the channel. But the data we could share, and we have data that shows whether people have been previously shopping with them in store. So the data could tell them quite accurately 50% of the people that are now shopping with you online are actually net new. They have never purchased with you before, which was very valuable insight. So suddenly the data that's coming from an omni-channel setup is starting to be real meaningful in how you run business and get real insights. And I think that's something we've seen happening now, which is very nice to see that this pays off now.
Interesting. Next question for you, Eric. I mean, at Commerce Tools, we're generally seeing this increase in technical maturity. Retailers aren't necessarily becoming tech businesses, but they're emulating some of the decisions these tech businesses make, particularly around things like Mac. And they're able to do that for pennies per transaction rather than the millions spent by the tech titans to get to the same sort of state of flexibility and agility. One thing we've been really interested in is this speed is even probably faster in the CPG sector, especially as they've come from most of them not having any D2C experience. And we're very lucky to have two of those forward-thinking CPG companies speaking later on this afternoon. But are we just seeing the early adopters at Commerce Tools, or is that generally a trend that you're seeing in the market?
No, this period of pandemic was a very good occasion for CPG brands to accelerate the way they are addressing their message and satisfying their consumers. So I've seen two things very important. First of all is, as Ron just says, about data. So having data everywhere is not a solution. So cloud operations, again, are very important to move all those data in one single platform, which is a consumer or customer data platform, so that as soon as you better understand who are your consumers, what they do, where they are, locations of the consumers are very important if you want to deliver them and satisfy them correctly. So building that consumer data platform was very essential for CPG brands. And then you are able to visualize and analyze those data to take some real-time decisions, which were very long before the pandemic and very short during the pandemic. And then you see what Commerce Tools is able to provide to those companies having the right data is to accelerate D2C scenarios and test things very quickly, being able for some brands to go on market very quickly, to experiment new things, to bring those feedbacks from consumers to test, learn, and change different things and increase loyalty, for example. So this is contributing to omni-channel strategies, and this is contributing for those brands to open new market too, which was sometime or before the pandemic more difficult. So I will not speak about early adopters. I will say now all the brands have to do that. Not doing that will create a big distance between consumers and brands, and will allow consumers to go to seek other brands, which could be dangerous for those brands. So very important to one time again analyze those data and to propose to consumers this discussion and better understand what the consumers are doing with those brands. So I've seen that, so I will not speak about early adopters. I'm speaking about something which is normal now. And this was not only B2C, this was B2B too. So here we speak more about customers, but we have seen, in their traditional trade model, some brand bringing transformation in their B2C model to address differently the relationship they have or they should have with their own customers.
Interesting. And for those that aren't yet doing D2C or very early, how does Google Cloud support those brands and those retailers on that journey?
Yeah, this is a very good question. First of all, for 90% of the people going to internet, it starts with a Google solution. So Google has a lot of solutions to start the experience, and for us, it's very important to bring this data model, this consumer data or customer data platform to any brands or any retailers to offer them this holistic view of their customers or consumers. And then with the cloud operation we are supporting, with our cloud platform, we are able to create that strong experience we were talking about omni-channel. As soon as you are able to position the different component of that experience, payment is one, commerce is another one, a front experience is another one, all these different solutions on the same platform, connected very easily through APIs, for example, are bringing a very simple, very easy experience to those brands very quickly. And then in a couple of weeks, we were speaking about 90 days, in a couple of weeks, Google is able to provide to this brands or to this retailer a great experience, mixing different solutions together to build those omni-channel stories, to build this consumers or customers satisfaction. So we are a pillar as Google Cloud, and we are a provider as Google, bringing, all that different, geolocalization solution, AI solutions to help those brands and retailers to increase their numbers, to increase their revenue, and to satisfy their consumers.
Right. Thanks. And Sonia, kind of moving on to you. I mean, one of the biggest reasons really to visit a physical store is the idea of discovery, kind of going in for something specific, but then you kind of fall in love with something else. Moving online as the store closed, it's one of the challenges. It's quite, the internet is built really around a find it, get it type mission. And that sort of wasn't able to happen during the lockdown. And as Contentstack is one of the leading Max certified CMS vendors working with some of the most innovative brands, what have you seen from the market during the pandemic to digitally enable some of these more discovery-based buying missions?
Yeah, that's been a very interesting search, really, of two things. The discovery is one aspect, right? So beauty, I think, is a great example for when you go into the shop and you buy your eyeliner, which actually probably none of you do. But, the lady says, hey, this eyeshadow also goes with that really, really well. You're in most online shops missing that element. So the search and merge part is really, really important to bring in, to leverage the data that Roland just mentioned and put it to good use right away to influence your bottom line. But actually what we're seeing also from a content perspective, the stories that Eric just mentioned, as much as we love our products, they are not stories. The narrative is in the content, and the content ties together the different touch points in this omni-channel unified commerce journey. So we have seen a lot of big brands and also retailers come to us and look for a way to add self-service components, add the advisory aspect, and not necessarily say, hey, you got to have 3 different red dresses here in your options, but how do you make sure you'll look good at the next wedding that you go to, which unfortunately in COVID times we didn't have so many of, really. That was maybe not an ideal example, but you know what I mean, right? It's about the intent of the customer, not that one transaction that comes out at the end of it. And to Eric's point, B2B, actually even more so than the direct to consumer and the retailers, because B2B has been in this denial that businesses want to buy from a salesperson still, and analysts have told us for many years that's not true. They also want to buy self-service, but we vendors are in denial, as I said. So now we've been forced to build out the B2B narrative and the B2B story, and now the data comes back saying, yes, actually that's what our business customers want too. So it's a very, very interesting learning curve also on the content side.
Interesting. And if I know over to you, Pascal, before we get to the questions, so a reminder for everyone, if you've got a question, please put it in the box. As we've been discussing, we've seen this massive increase in maturity and innovation from within the e-commerce sector, and there's no sign of it kind of slowing down and getting back to some semblance of normality. Pascal is one of our most experienced partners and an innovation leader in the sector. A lot of companies look to you to keep them ahead of the curve. And how do you do that? How do you separate what's hype from what's shiny to what's actually really worth investment?
Yeah, that's obviously a difficult question to answer. As I said in the beginning, the past year has been a lot about rapid response. It was, some of the others on the panel said, this pandemic happened overnight, and everybody just reacted in a way that made sense at the time. And I think now we are at a point where the ones that responded quickly are looking to kind of mature the solutions that they've put in place over the past year and a half. And the ones that weren't able to respond so quickly, the laggards that Sonia talked about, I think there's still hope for them, because they can learn a lot from what these good examples did over the past year and a half, and actually pick and choose the things that out of this wide variety of experiments that went on. Pick and choose the ones that resonated, that appeared to be successful, etc. And I think that will be the next phase. It will be about internalizing or making the things that worked during the pandemic, make those things part of our daily operations, and start building on those successes. And that's from a go-to-market perspective, or from a touchpoint perspective, etc. If we look at the layer underneath that, and Eric has also been talking about this, the companies that were agile from an organizational perspective, but also from a technology perspective, that were already using cloud services and microservices and small modules and those kind of things, those were the ones that were best prepared to respond to anything that was thrown at them. And I think, it's another proof point that approach works. Sonia and myself and others in this space have been advocating this for, a number of years, that agility is key, and, never let a good crisis go to waste. The past year and a half has shown that it was actually true. It was not just made up consulting talk. It was true. It was true that the companies that were agile from an organizational perspective and from a technical perspective were the ones that were able to respond quickly and came out, the stronger. Interesting. We've actually got some questions from the audience. Anyone else at home, do answer now. We might get another chance to ask one more. Interesting one here. What's the future of physical stores? I don't know who wants to jump in to that one.
Can I kick it off? Because it's something I was thinking about. What I found really remarkable is, when stores opened here again in the Netherlands, I went to one of these famous Dutch stores, Hema, which sells anything you need on a day-to-day basis. And that place was pretty packed, and there's lots of people queuing up, and that's something we're all trying to work around, like how do we get these queues out of stores? But they're all chatting to each other how happy they were to finally be back in a store. They were so much enjoying it. And that reminded me of the fact that people do like to go out there. It's part of a social exercise routine. They like to meet people. People like to go out shopping. So I think that underpinned that, and I think it supports, the idea that we've been thinking about for a longer time. Like, how do we turn these stores into, fun places to go to? How do you make it more and more about the experience? How do people, fall in love with the brand, interact with the brand, see what's new, see what's fun, and then make it super convenient to purchase, to figure it out, whether you do that online, in store, let it come together. But there is a absolute intrinsic need of people to go out there and interact and see the brand. And I think that's something that we shouldn't forget.
It's interesting that you mentioned the HEMA as an example. I mean, we've been historically also at Valtech, we've been working a lot for luxury brands, and there the stores have always been an experience center or a flagship store, whatever you want to call it, where the HEMA or the local supermarket, etc., is very functional. It's just about grabbing the products and making the transaction. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of that experience go into these, also into the normal stores. I'm not sure if that's the right label to put on it, but that would be one of my expectations. And digital will then play a role in it, because then we are used to the curbside pickup or those kind of things. That will actually make the store a little bit less of the, a little bit less the warehouse and a little bit more the experience center.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be important for the business people to really capitalize on that. My first trip was to HEMA too, and for the people that are not in the Netherlands, it's not an exciting shop, right? You get like cheap cutlery next to, I don't know, earbuds and underpants, right? But it felt like a field trip. I was so excited. And if you can capitalize on the excitement of people going back into your brick and mortar store, you have a tremendous opportunity there.
And consumers are not opposing stores to digital. Consumers, they want to buy, they want to be understood as consumers. So they love to be in stores, they love to buy online, they love to go in marketplaces, they love to be connected. And they never wake up in the morning to say, I'm going to a store. They want an experience. It could start with a store, it could end with a store, but at the end, what they want is to find the product they love and to be considered as consumers. So it means that stores must evaluate and take care about everything which is coming online to better understand consumers and better know them, so that consumers' experience is going to be great. Imagine when you go in a store, if somebody recognizes you and know exactly what you buy, what you bought before and so on, the experience is better than to let the people go in stores and never found the products they are searching for, being unsatisfied, and then going back to their house and going online, and this is a bad experience. So it's the combination of all these different channels which is giving a very good experience.
Well, that's it. Our time's up. Thank you all so very much for joining us. It's been a great discussion. And if